Okay, so first we have to know how many emotions are there. Well, you say you can feel a huge amount of emotions: anger, jealousy, the love of wanting, feeling close, warmth, surprise, fear. Well, you know what? Actually, it's a good question how many are the basic emotions. Because, like, for instance, if you're jealous of somebody, if you don't want that, you don't have a desire for something, then how could you be jealous? But there's also a little bit of anger mixed in there, right? So there might be something which is jealousy a pure emotion, or maybe not. Well, psychologists have come up with a really interesting way of doing this, and they say that there are a number of basic emotions, and other emotions are a combination of some sort of that. Now, it's a very complex statistical way of finding out exactly how many emotions there are, but we can say that this is the brainchild of a very important psychologist, a fellow by the name of Paul Ekman. And Paul Ekman was actually tried to find out not the question of how many emotions are, but where do they come from? The question of nature and nurture. Nature and nurture. You remember that? Nature and nurture, if it was actually natural, born, genetic, or nurture comes from society. That's the question he brought into. Because what happened was back in the 1950s and 60s, the general idea was that emotions are a product of cultural socialization. This was promoted by the work of an anthropologist, a very famous anthropologist by the name of Margaret Mead, and she said that all the emotions are different, are different from one place to another. And in fact, there's some sort of truth that, because not really because we found even today that the expression of emotions are culturally based. Some sort of expression of emotions are culturally based. For instance, there's a recent research in about 2-3 years old that the Japanese, when they listen to emotion, they don't look at facial expression, but rather they listen to the tone of voice primarily on top of the on top of facial expressions. Which us Americans, we look at facial expressions now. But he wanted to find out if that's really true. So what he did was he wanted to find out if you can look at facial expressions and you can look at emotions, expression of emotions, and be able to determine by looking at that what the emotions are. And what the question then would be, how do you find a place where you can look at this experimentally? In other words, you need to find a place, some place or another. You need to find a place where there are people, a culture, who don't know anything about culturally learning the expressions of emotions. In other words, we learn from our parents, but we also learn from society in general. We learn from movies, from television, and from newspapers, and from our pastors and priests, and all these people. Everybody is pushing on to what it means. If you're crying, that must mean you're sad. If you are smiling, that means you're happy. Is that really something because we were taught that's, or maybe it's inborn, maybe it's hardwired. So he went out to find a culture, and he found one, someplace in New Guinea, right in the hills of New Guinea. That's, you remember where the headhunters live? No, he didn't go to that culture. He went to another culture, a more peaceful culture. And what he did was like this. He took pictures of faces, Western faces, because they'd never seen people like that, and told them simple stories. Stories like the person lost his son, and showed pictures of different emotional faces, and can they actually identify the particular emotions? And he actually did that. He measured a huge amount of people, and he came up with 6 basic emotions, right? 6 basic emotions. And he said there's no more than 6 basic emotions. Number 1 is anger. Number 2 is disgust. Number 3 is fear. Number 4 is happiness. Number 5 is sadness. And then the 6 is surprise. And you can look at these pictures, and you'll see what is which one is which, and you can probably identify it. Later on, he added another one which is called contempt. Contempt. Let's think about contempt. What it means. It means like I hate, right? I hate you. Interesting about contempt that is really important. The most important single predictive factor of a failed relationship is when you get the emotion of contempt in there. You might be angry at your loved one. That happens all the time, but that doesn't mean you're going to break apart. But if you get the emotion of contempt, right, then that's going to happen. Well, it's not going to happen. It's a signal about predictor. Of course, you can have some content that it's not going to. We see with everything about it is different. But that's exactly those are the 7 basic emotions, and all the other emotions are some sort of contributed contribution, different parts of those put together, and then we identify the emotions.